why did the NIST cross the road?
Why?
To define a quantum standard for cryptography.
Oh my God.
Dude, nobody besides you gets that joke.
Ever.
What are you thinking?
Oh my God. Who brought the smart kid?
Nobody gets it. Hey guys, before we start, I have one piece of errata. I was corrected by somebody on Twitter about something that I responded to. Remember you talked about the shooting in Norway?
Yeah.
And I said something about right-wing, skinheads in Norway. Turns out it was not done by a far-right shooter, but a fanatic Muslim.
Oh.
He targeted a pride parade pre-party at a pub in Oslo. That is just an alliterative sentence right there.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, I was thinking of the one that happened like 10 years ago, where on an island retreat, where it was a right-winger. I think that's the one you were probably thinking of. But there haven't been that many shootings in Norway, but there's been so many here in the U.S., it's hard to keep track.
The other correction from the same person was the DDoS effects on Norway. It was literally no effects other than a couple of newspapers with problems in 15 minutes. Killnet, who claims the attack mostly went for subdomains of sites which are not in much use. I don't know if that's true or not, but I wanted to give that guy a little chance to be heard.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, now that we have all the depressing stuff out of the way, let's talk about more depressing stuff.
No, there's good news today.
There is.
Well, yesterday.
We do have good news. So, good news for you guys, bad news for me, but whatever. Good news.
Well, that's the different news. So I'll use the good news for everybody. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has finally released their recommendations for quantum-resistant encryption standards.
Ah, now I get your joke.
There you go. There you go.
I still don't get it.
NISTs.
Joke adjacent.
Okay. So for quantum-resistant algorithms.
Yeah, there's one key encapsulation mechanism, CHEM, that is called Crystal's Kyber, and it's a lattice-based encryption. So it's geometric versus algebraic.
Wait a second.
So it's much more secure.
First off, Crystal's Kyber.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome.
It sounds like a stripper I dated in college.
Oh my God.
Of the 3 signing mechanisms, the first one they recommended was Crystal's dilithium.
Oh my God. Okay,
Come
so
on.
first off,
I'm not
a
kidding.
little bit of trivia. What is a Kyber crystal? Anybody?
I didn't even understand the joke. How do you expect me to answer that one?
I know the dilithium.
What is it? A Kyber crystal is the crystal that is put inside of a lightsaber.
Lightsaber, that's right.
That determines the color and is that the Jedi chooses. And the dilithium crystal, Mr. Hines?
That is the crystals that run the Enterprise and other starships. And
they make warp drive
Trek.
possible, right?
Yeah.
You know what I find interesting about these two crystal algorithms is that they're sci-fi, just like quantum. They both don't exist.
Oh, okay. There's a chance, Dwayne. There's a chance that when you say that, you'll just cease to exist.
It's possible.
Pop into the Atlantic. So here's the deal. The encryption standards that we use today, RSA, Diffie-Hellman, elliptical curve, are great if all you have to go after them with is classical computers. They're great. They're unbreakable by classical computers to any time standard that matters. But the problem is quantum computers have already demonstrated that when they get to sufficient power, which is coming, they're toast. Because the math that they're dependent on, hard for classical computers, not so hard for quantum computers. And as the quantum computers get bigger, it's going to become trivial for them to be broken. So for the last 6 years, NIST has been on a search for candidates. I think they started with 48 candidate algorithms, and they've narrowed it down to just 1 on the encryption side and 3 on the signing side. There's still 4 alternatives that have until October 1st to present more data. But that means that Crystal's Kyber will start to become a standard, and, request for comments is going out, and there'll be a conference later this year, and it'll become the new standard for encryption, the way all the past encryption standards have come. And most people won't know anything about, the details of it, but this is a big deal because quantum is coming, and the faster we can get people accustomed to it and secure from it, the better off they'll be.
So I've said this before on the show, that the only thing I understand about quantum is that it will be used to protect just as well as it will be used to attack.
Yes.
And so when the problem comes when your defenses aren't shored up with quantum computing and the offenses are.
So it's kind of a problem of this. There are mechanisms in quantum computing, like quantum key distribution, QKD, that will make communications utterly secure, totally secure. The problem is their widespread use will arrive after RSA and other encryptions that we're using today are rendered useless.
Meaningless, useless, yeah.
And so the problem is the lag between widespread implementation and the fact that we can use it as a weapon. So we do need these algorithms that aren't quantum based but are quantum resistant to get into widespread use. Because the other thing is we don't know when quantum computers are going to move into their next generation. When they move into their next generation, when we're talking about tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of qubits, right now we're talking about hundreds, then they'll be able to solve these problems pretty easily, I think. We don't know when that's going to be. And this is a way for us to prepare for it rather than have it sprung upon us.
We were just at Microsoft office in Copenhagen doing a user group talk, Richard Campbell and I, and they had a quantum computing lab there.
Where was this again?
Microsoft in Copenhagen.
Nice.
Huh. Yeah.
Very nice.
It was just at a user group there. And we just walked up the stairs. Of course, the doors are locked and stuff. And there's people on these they just look like big refrigerators with pipes coming out of them. There's three of them and they're looking at these things and looking at papers and stuff. And who knows what they were doing. We couldn't get their attention, but we were very, very curious.
It's interesting. Microsoft, up until recently, Microsoft kind of had an embargo. I don't know, it was an official embargo, but they didn't talk about their quantum systems other than the languages and their cloud offerings, which weren't based on their quantum developments. They had a setback a few years ago. It looks like they're out of the woods now and they're back on track because they're starting to talk about it again. And so,
do you foresee a day where people use quantum computers in graphics cards?
No.
Is it something that you have to have a big machine for, or is it ever going to get to the form of a personal computer?
No, because it's not useful that way. So you'll never have an email client that's quantum computing based because we have classical computers and they're much more efficient, much cheaper. What the quantum computer can do is it can solve problems that the classical computer will never solve because it does it in a different way.
So it's really more along the lines of a supercomputer.
Yes, it's much more like a supercomputer with very specific abilities, things like molecular modeling, password cracking, those kinds of things. Is more, it's going to be a cloud resource. You're going to have cloud computing based quantum computers that you'll call on. They'll feed something to your program and something your computer program could never have done before. It will now be able to do because the quantum gives it a hint that puts it in the right direction.
So therefore you don't think that it will ever replace basic networking like the internet nodes? Even though we have quantum entanglement across,
we'll have quantum communication mechanisms, and there'll be quantum key generation and things like that. But no, I really don't believe it's ever going to be suited because right now every implementation that I've seen is only a couple of degrees above absolute zero.
Okay.
Right, and the size of a barn.
Yeah. So they're just not really suited to that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, you heard it here first, kids.
So that's the
and
nerdy
I trust
part
Patrick on this. He knows nerdy. He knows quantum.
So let's talk about
good thing somebody does.
Let's talk about the stuff that makes Dwayne happy and everyone else sad.
All right, is this an awesome story for Dwayne?
Oh. This is an awesome story. We're going to talk about Jenkins.
Jenkins? Yeah.
Jenkins. All the developers on the call just perked up. Oh.
Yeah. Not really. They're like, Jenkins! Ugh.
Leroy Jenkins.
It's like it became popular in the 90s, didn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Jenkins is, if you've ever had to do the full development lifecycle of building and deploying and testing and automating that in any sort of way, Jenkins is a massive platform for doing that. Mm. So last Thursday, if I remember correctly, July 1st, Jenkins is a highly popular platform in enterprises, blah, 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 building and testing and deploying software. They released the fact that the Jenkins security team announced that there are 34, count them, 34 security vulnerabilities affecting 29 of the plugins for the Jenkins open source automation software. Yeah.
Oh boy. Hey, have the recipe plugin.
Yeah, you name it.
So you want to put your beef bourguignon recipe in Jenkins? No, I wouldn't do that.
Probably not.
I don't even know. This probably has nothing to do with recipes.
But everything from Elasticsearch, GitHub, that plugin, the Plot Pilot, Project Inheritance, the recipe plugin. I mean, there's all sorts of plugins in here that are affected by this. And some of them are cross-site scripting, some of them are cross-site request forgeries, stealing of API keys, passwords, etc., etc., etc. The list is relatively large.
Yeah.
So according to this article, the infected plugins have a total of more than 22,000 installs, which sounds small. It's only 22,000.
It does?
Worldwide.
However,
yeah.
a quick search on Shodan shows that there is actually more than 144,000 exposed Jenkins servers on the internet that are unpatched right now.
Oh my gosh.
So why the conflict in the numbers? Are they not using Shodan? Is that basically registered clients versus...
Probably registered clients versus just open source usage. Yeah.
So this isn't quite a Log4j, but it's another example of the component parts being vulnerable makes whatever you've built vulnerable when you include it.
Sure, and understanding that you might, understanding whether, I mean, heck, if any of you have tried to configure a Jenkins server, it's not easy, but then understanding what pieces are behind it, which plugins are actually being used, and what those versions are, is just it's a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
So as of the publication last Thursday, according to the Jenkins team, there is no fix. So,
wow.
Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
I mean, ideally, okay, so the fix here would be if you do have an externally focused Jenkins server, and it doesn't need to be, then don't have it be externally focused. Don't allow, outside and random people on the internet to hit your Jenkins server, unless for some reason you expect one of them is going to do building, deployment, and testing of your software.
I mean, even then, no.
Or you could use a more modern technology, right? Like microservices or something.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think there's several ways to solve this with infrastructure, not necessarily patching. And we'll see patches come out for these over time. But I'd say if you are running a Jenkins server and you just hastily throw it up and have it connected to the internet so you can do, I don't know, builds and stuff from the house without VPNing in, it's probably a bad idea. Make sure it's locked down. Make sure nobody can get to it who shouldn't get to it. Then you're probably okay. That would be our advice here is go lock down your Jenkins.
For once, we're not giving advice to the criminals. Gee, there's an idea.
Yeah, we just told them to go look for Jenkins servers everywhere.
Yeah, it's true, we did.
We did. And use Shodan because the internal Jenkins list is smaller.
All right, so let's talk about the UK Army's Twitter and YouTube accounts.
Yeah, Patrick, let's talk about the Army.
What happened?
I for one welcome our military overlords.
So you know what? It's always sad when you have an organization that many people look up to, and then their public-facing social media gets compromised, and that's what happened here. Right. The British Army's Twitter account got compromised, and they were sending out messages about out to either bogus NFT sites or bogus crypto giveaways. So lots of people see this as a legitimate site. What's really damning about this too is, I don't know if, I know you both are on Twitter. We're all on Twitter. It's super hard to get that little blue check mark that says you're verified and important in the world. So obviously the British Army does have that check mark, which a lot of people take like going to a bank and seeing the lock up in the upper left-hand corner of the address bar, right? There's some form of validation that happened here, that this account is doing all the right things and is important and is the right people who are putting these posts
out. They are
out.
who they say they are.
It's credibility. It's instant credibility.
Yeah, and with social engineering, I mean, that's what you're looking for, is a way to add instant credibility, and that could be the things you say or the terminology you use. If I'm trying to break into a telco, right? If I know all the telco internal terminology when I call them, right? They go, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. He must be a telecommunications engineer. Same thing here. When you see a tweet come out that is from what looks like a legitimate account, and it is. It was just compromised.
Well, you can tell. I mean, they showed a picture of the tweet here.
Yeah,
that was the @British Army was compromised, and
you don't think they use that icon?
No, come on. This is like a robot vomiting or something, and
with its head detached.
Yeah, his head detached. And the caption on Twitter, which is sort of like your call sign. We all have a dark side. What will yours look like? An NFT collection created by @TMW blah blah blah. And we're ready to present you with a collection of anomalies.
Mm-hmm.
They will animate in typical possessed style. I don't even know what this means, but I mean, somebody knew that. Somebody could understand that.
Yep. And sadly, if you send something out, I don't know how many, let's see, they have 362,000 followers. So statistically, out of 362,000 followers, they're going to get at least 1% click-through rate, no matter what they post.
Yeah.
No matter how stupid it looks, right?
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, that's the people who will who click on anything.
Right. So at that point,
I'm thinking about you, Mom.
Now you've just alienated one of two of our listeners.
She doesn't listen to this show. She wouldn't know how. She likes to click on stuff.
The moral of this story is be careful, even if you see a tweet or a message, right, from an account that looks valid.
Or in this case, doesn't.
Or is valid.
Yeah, and is valid. No, it's a good point.
Why did they give themselves away, though, with that stupid...
It's funny. I don't know. Like, the three of us would have come up with a way better campaign to push people to our
it
site.
sounds like a kid, It sounds like a kid got a hold of it and then said, hey, I want to change the British Army's icon to some stupid robot and push out messages that don't make any sense.
Yep. Yeah, which all right, I get it. I mean, maybe that will minimize the amount of trouncing this person gets when the British Army finds them.
Maybe.
But we on this show have always talked about, listen, if you get an email from somebody with an attachment and you're not expecting that email, or it's not somebody you trust, it's just some random email saying, hey, here's an invoice, whatever, don't click on it. But we overlook the whole social aspect of what if you get an email from somebody you do trust? Like if Patrick were to send me an email with an attachment saying, hey, Dwayne, here's a list of our new customers we're looking to do a red team and engagement on. What do you think? I'm more likely to click on that than I am to, click on one that comes outside.
Yeah, you know what? Here's a good Patrick Hines analogy. If you're walking down the street and you're a little hungry and you see like a pizza box and you open it and there's a slice of pizza in there, are you going to eat it? No. You're not going to eat it because the context.
You've been hanging around with me too long, Carl.
Because the context, and I had to use pizza, of course, because,
if it's double sausage, extra cheese, though.
Patrick's like, double sausage.
Patrick would think about
extra cheese. Let me think about that.
And if it's still warm, maybe.
But even if it was a piece of packaged food that was still in the package, I wouldn't.
Sure.
You're in the supermarket, you get some potato chips, but the bag is open. You put it back and get one that's not open.
Right.
When I talk about this, I say, basically the internet is like vans driving by all the time, stopping and offering you to get in with various bribes of puppies, candy, pizza, money, sex, everything in the world. And hopefully you've lived long enough to know, don't get in anybody's van, even if you know them.
That's great.
You have such a dark view of the internet. Holy crap.
Right.
But what if they have a lost puppy?
Like that time Dwayne said, hey, Carl, I'm sending you a link in the chat. Click on it.
Right? Just to a white van.
Sure.
It'll be fine. I saw it in a cartoon once. I think it'll work. That's a Stephen Wright. Remember the comedian Stephen Wright with the real deadpan?
Oh, of course.
He had a joke.
Yeah.
He's like, I like to pick up hitchhikers, and then I say, buckle up. I want to try something. I think it'll work. I saw it in a cartoon once.
The hitchhiker joke.
The other day, somebody broke into my apartment and replaced all my furniture with exact replicas.
Yep. I picked up a hitchhiker the other day, and he said, "Aren't you afraid I'm a serial killer?" And I said, "What's the odds of two of us being in the same car?"
I'd like to get out, please.
This is my favorite quick one. Yesterday, oh no, that was someone else.
Oh,
that's awesome.
All right. Anyway, so next one is kind of scary because it's developers like me who use tools like NPM. There's a problem with a supply chain attack that happened. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, so Carl, tell us a little bit about NPM. So it gives it's a supply chain thing, but what does that mean? Like, what do you use NPM for?
So NPM is a package manager. So rather than having, if you use a JavaScript package, let's say that somebody wrote this package that does all sorts of crazy stuff. Maybe it does quantum entanglement. I don't know, Patrick, but anyway, it's a JavaScript library. But rather than going to, you might have 18 in your application, all right? Rather than going and downloading the source and putting it in place and trying to keep up with it, they've put it all together in this package manager. So you install the package manager, you just say, here's the list of ones that I want, and it goes and downloads the latest things and keeps them up to date.
Which is awesome.
Useful things like Log4j.
Log4j.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened with NPM?
So NPM, think of it as the packages and package manager delivers the packages. The packages can be updated by anybody. Not necessarily anybody, but there are ways to update these packages, and you as a developer can update links and packages, etc. So let's say we have a package and it pulls down all sorts of other assets from different sites. Well, wouldn't it be great if you modified one of those packages to pull down, say, a package from a developer site that looks very similar in URL? This is also known as typo squatting, where you take a URL and, maybe instead of, let's just say like Microsoft, instead of Microsoft.com, you do Microsoft, but with instead of SOFT, it's S0FT. Right. So to the undiscerning eye,
it's very subtle.
It still
change.
looks like Microsoft.com, but it's really not.
Like those taxi cabs in Bulgaria I told you about.
Exactly. Yes, same exact thing, but in this case, a lot of these packages had URLs to assets that were pulling down information from typo squatted domains. So super hard to find. And just as an example, one of these packages actually had over 17,000 downloads. So you got to be careful with if you're using these package managers, and I'd even say it in, if you're in a Linux distro and you're using apt-get and pulling down from a repo. But anytime you're pulling packages,
don't worry about
internet,
that, kids. Just let that gloss over you. It's okay. You don't need to know what he's talking about.
just nod and smile like Dwayne does.
Just nod and smile.
Well, there's an analogy here. If you go to any random website that you find on a search and you download a program that does something, if you don't know the provenance of that code, it's going to do you in because you're going to. It's like finding something on the street and just eating it.
Right.
It could be rat poison. It could be anything.
But you learn to tell which ones look shady and which ones don't. Right. I mean, the ones that aren't shady.
Only after getting food poisoning a few times.
Yeah, the ones that aren't intentionally poisoning you usually have strong branding. Right. And the reason I say that is because they invest a lot of money in their branding and their reputation, and a website is traceable to the owners and all that stuff. The URL is whatever the product is or the company and all the logos and all that stuff. And you say, all right, you pay for it. Maybe you don't pay for it. You download it. Chances are when you download a PDF manual from a legit company's website that it's not going to be a problem.
If you pay for it, that's the big thing.
If you pay for it, that's true. But I mean, but there are companies that have products that just put their products, their manuals out as PDF files that anyone can download. And if it was a shady looking website like, Bob's DiscountSharkCages.com or something like that, you would, I'll just let that sink in. That's a time bomb joke.
Its time is over.
Yeah, okay. But if it's a shady-looking site that looks like it might have been put together by a script or a machine or just something just terrible looking, and there's no discernible brand in the URL, you know what I mean? I mean, those are the kinds of things I steer away from.
Right.
Especially if they say like super download site.
So this is great hacker advice. If you like our red team, where you would register a real company and then set up a real website and do it years ago and actually have marketing people work on that website and actually have an 800 number to that website where we will pick up the phone and act like support engineers and then put the malicious PDF up there.
That's nation state level.
See, now it looks legit.
That's Dwayne level.
Surprisingly not that hard to do. Anyways.
Okay, not that hard to do, but yeah. You got to cover your tracks.
Time and forethought. So, anyways, moral of this story here is, there are a lot of great resources out there. GitHub, for example, this doesn't have to be NPM modules. This could be GitHub. How many times has somebody gone up to GitHub and pulled down, some code to do something, right? Oh, hey, here's a great C# library that will, parse URLs for you. Oh, awesome. I'm going to pull it down. I'm going to use it. Well, if you didn't read through that code and understand exactly what it does,
all bets are off.
You could be in trouble. Yeah, you could be running whatever.
Pass it through some kind of AI that looks for things and,
Right.
tells you
something. I mean, you might not be the best at doing, white hat and sort of code analysis and review and security, right? There's a lot of actually really good, there was an example. I can't remember the guy's name, which is terrible. But there was an example where one really brilliant developer.
My name's Patrick. Thank you.
My God! I said brilliant developer. So there's one brilliant developer that took who in a small snippet of code actually wrote an exploit in that code, and it was like a tabletop exercise. I want to say at the NSA, and they put the code up, and nobody could find the exploit in a very small. Like, I want to say it was 100 lines of code just to look through. And this guy was a genius at hiding implants inside of code. So, yeah, if you're not at that level where you can read through code and know exactly what's going on and what the ramifications are, I agree, Carl. Use something like a code audit tool or something that's going to scan and look for those things.
All right. Who wants to tackle this tweet?
I do.
Okay.
Kendra Schaefer. Okay, so we don't typically use tweets on this show as a sort of source of truth because anybody can put anything on the internet, and we know that. However, and this Kendra Schaefer person has 13,000 followers. Not that necessarily means that they're, post legitimate things, but this does sound like something that's in the realm of completely legitimate.
I've heard this from other sources. Crazy. China Dan?
Yeah, so this one...
The name of the hacker is China Dan.
Okay.
You're getting ahead of yourself here. Crazy China Dan. What'd you call me? So she posts, if you're not following this, you should be. Word on the social media street is that China's police force, the MPS Shanghai database, was hacked with personal information and case records of 1 billion citizens. And the records are for sale on Telegram. It's about 23 terabytes of data.
Wow.
So doesn't necessarily affect all of our listeners, but just realize that, sometimes you can be as careful as you want with your data. Like, you all of us, when you go to a website, you're presented with those, hey, do you want to accept all the cookies? And none of us just say yes, right? We say customize, and we knock it all the way down to only the ones we can't turn off. And a lot of us are surfing using search engines like DuckDuckGo, and a lot of us are using, Chrome in private mode, and a lot of us are surfing through VPNs, and, so there's a lot of things we're doing sort of at the edge of trying to stay as private on the internet as possible.
Using Apple's lockdown mode.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about that. I think that's going to be sad.
Anyway, I didn't mean to derail your train.
I know, right? But realize there's still a raft of data that exists about you in the world.
Especially if you live in China.
Especially if, like your citizen score. That can be accessed by somebody, which means that hackers can get to it at some point. So, it's tough game out there trying to stay stay private and not have all of your personal data leaked. But in this record, it looks like it is name, address, national ID, mobile number, police, and medical records from one of the Asian countries.
Wow.
So looks like this was a improperly implemented Elasticsearch deployment.
One of the Asian countries with 1 billion people.
Could be any.
Well, we already said it was. We already said it was China.
It was Shanghai. It's China.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't think we were playing coy there.
No.
Right. It could be any of them. It's probably that one. So just realize, like I said, you got to be careful with your data, and no matter how careful you are, still always assume if any of these people get an email or a text message saying, hey, well, whatever. It could be hyper specific at this point about a medical record or something along those lines. Still don't trust it.
All right. So Apple's new lockdown mode defends against government spyware. Government spyware? That doesn't exist.
I think you just put two stories up against each other that cancel each other out.
I know, right?
So we all remember the NSO group and their awesome Pegasus software that can, zero-click exploit an iPhone and watch everything you do.
Right.
So Apple, obviously, and this is the cat and mouse game, the arms race that happens between hackers and the vendors all the time. Right, the hackers have a leg up for a little while, and in this case, actually, the hackers were a legitimate software company out of Israel. But whatever,
right.
Creating spyware, and then Apple. One of I think one of the claims to fame of Apple is the fact that they're one of the harder operating systems to breach, and they're quote unquote fighting for your privacy, if you will.
Yeah.
That's at least that's what they publicly say. Who knows? But that being said, it's interesting to see how Apple then comes back and says, you know what? You're going to be able to put your phone into a mode that it will not be compromisable.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is a super bold statement. And if if just reading through the press release here, turning on lockdown mode, this is going to be an iOS 16, iPadOS 16, and macOS Ventura. It hardens devices with certain strict limitations, which is neat. So for messaging, most messaging attachments other than images will just be flat out blocked. Like links, previews, etc. will be disabled.
Well, that's smart.
Yeah, it's awesome. Web browsing, certain complex web technologies like JIT or just-in-time compilation for JavaScript, which is where the browser does a lot of the processing, are disabled unless the user excludes this as a trusted site from the lockdown mode.
What about WebAssembly in the browser?
I don't know. They didn't mention it.
I doubt that it'll work.
It'll be interesting to test.
I mean, it has the same, what am I trying to say, sandbox that code runs in that JavaScript does.
Okay. So it's I'm speculating here, but my guess is that will not work. Unless you trust the site. You exclude it from this hyper lockdown mode.
Oh, you can do that. You can say
yes,
this site is okay.
Yeah. You can mark it as trusted in the lockdown mode, which
So, for example, if you're a reporter for a specific magazine, you could could whitelist your magazine so that you'd see that.
Wow.
Yeah. Apple services incoming invitations, service requests, including FaceTime calls, are blocked if the user has not previously sent the initiator a call or request in the past. So if you don't, if I call Patrick and talk to him and then he initiates a FaceTime, fine. If Patrick just tries to initiate a FaceTime and I've never talked to him, it just automatically gets blocked. It never happened.
Now, the problem is if you turn this on for everybody with new phones on the first day, then nobody
talks to anybody.
But that's a good indicator of the fact that I've never, I don't want to hear from people I've never talked to before.
Right.
In most cases.
Wired connections with a computer or accessory are blocked when the iPhone is locked.
Wow.
So if you plug your phone, let's say I go to an airport charging station, and let's say that charging station has been maliciously modified by a hacker to have some, deploy code as soon as you plug your iPhone in, which has happened plenty of times in the past.
Yeah.
Now, if your phone is locked when you plug that in, it will not allow that type of transaction. I think this is interesting. There's going to be, I think at first people will get frustrated, especially the people who don't worry about these types of breaches all the time. But ultimately, I think it's a step forward in making it a more secure operating system.
It's not going to shield the criminal from, exposing their identity or anything like that. It's not like a VPN or any kind of privacy thing like that. It's really just to protect your phone device from.
It limits the surface area.
Yeah,
it makes a smaller surface area for attack.
All right.
Yeah. So let's come back to the Pegasus. The NSO Group's Pegasus deployment. If I were to text you a bit of, it's actually like an exploit in, I think, the EXIF or the JPEG format or whatever.
Right. It could be in a JPEG file.
Yeah. So if I were to text you that and you go to then open that message, even without opening the message, when it gets pre-processed, it then exploits a buffer and then downloads software. In this particular lockdown mode, it wouldn't process it, right? So I think this will help against, what if there's another format? What if it's not JPEG? What if it's BMP files? Or what if it's WAV files? Or what if it's memos? Or what if it's like there's so many formats of things I can send you, and this is like, you know what? F it. I'm not going to allow anything except.
I wonder if you have to have the latest version of their hardware in order to run that version of the software.
That's a great question.
Because I have...
knowing Apple, yes.
I haven't... I would say it's old, but it's not. It's like what is this, an iPhone 12?
I have a 10
Plus
that
super
is
thing.
still taking updates.
Yeah, it's still taking updates, but now...
Hey, are you two telling our listeners the devices that you...
No,
did I say that?
I said I have one.
No.
I didn't say I use one. I have 18 different phones.
I just use that on different days. I don't always use that one.
As our deviant listeners are writing down, target iPhone 12.
Yeah, right.
I use a Zune. That's all I use.
I use a Zune.
Oh my
wait,
God.
Hold on. I got it right there.
What is
the
this,
poopy brown
1991?
Zune right there. Yeah. It's on my
Zune.
desk. I got the Zune.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's awesome.
That was a draw from
all
nowhere.
Our listeners just said, what the hell is a Zune?
Exactly.
Don't worry about it.
Imagine this, 2006. You want music. Yeah. All right. So I think we're done with this, but honestly I think it's a good move. So I will definitely turn this on and play around with it and see what gets broken. I know a lot of easily frustrated listeners or users of the iPhone may not, but I would recommend it.
All right.
Well, it's going to be a less convenient use of the phone, which means it's more secure. So remember, you're throwing away convenience. This is geared towards the article specifically says geared towards people who are likely to suffer from governmental
attacks,
espionage.
Yeah.
So
then
journalists,
I'll definitely turn it on.
Activists, people who are wanted.
After being on this podcast, you're gonna be. I saw your picture in the post office the other day. Now our listeners go, "What's a post office?"
I needed to buy stamps. Wait, what?
What the heck is that? These guys are from another planet. All right, so the last story today. Ransomware hacking groups move from Cobalt Strike to Brute Ratel. And Brute Ratel is my dad's old aftershave, isn't it? That's what he used to splash on his face.
Little Brute Ratel. So it's an interesting shift. So Cobalt Strike. So what's interesting about this is both of these packages are for sale software. These aren't software packages that were created in the dark, deep recesses of the internet and are used by just wily hackers. Like these programs are both used by security professionals like us to test sites. So these are legitimate packages.
So Cobalt Strike is a toolkit allowing attackers to deploy beacons on compromised devices to perform remote network surveillance or execute commands. So they're used by good guys and also by bad guys.
And for a long time, Cobalt Strike was maniacal about making sure their software didn't fall into the wrong hands.
Which is funny because they wouldn't sell it to us.
The founder talked to me.
and you're surprised?
It's a real story.
You're surprised by this?
It's like he knew us.
A founder of the company talked to us after we had it for a year. They noted a geography that they didn't recognize. I explained it all to them. and then they never sold it to us again.
We got lawyers involved. Yeah.
And they said, yeah, but that Dwayne guy is a professional criminal. We're not going to give anything
they said
to him.
fine. They said fine, and then they were going to get back to me. And then shortly after, the company changed hands. And then every freaking week I hear about Cobalt Strike being used by bad guys. So
yeah,
it went out the window very quickly.
Yeah. So we can't get a hold of it legitimately, but bad guys can get it, right?
You could have got those bad guys.
So bad guys have been using Cobalt Strike for a long time. Good guys have been using Cobalt Strike, but the evil Hackzor teams have been using Cobalt Strike for a long time to deploy beacons, and all beacons are is each of these C2s, command and control structures.
Command and control.
Yeah, have their own terminology. So Cobalt Strike has beacons. If you were to look at Covenant, I don't know if you guys have ever played Halo. I know Patrick has. But there's a C2 called Covenant, which is based on Microsoft's Halo, so all the terminology is Halo-esque. And the agent you deploy is actually called the Grunt, and that Grunt then communicates over HTTP, whatever. But there's tons and tons and tons of these C2s that you can use for free. Some of them, like Covenant, or are paid, like Cobalt Strike.
So let's explain something. So if I were to take over 100 computer systems, I really don't want to be remote shelling into each one of them or having to pop a buffer to get to each one of them.
Right.
I want them to check in to get commands from a central location, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about remote control of an army, large or small, of hacked devices or devices that we're testing.
Right.
And that's what the bad guys use it for. It's also what the good guys use it for, but it's been turned to bad use.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the hackers are switching.
Yeah.
Right. They're switching to a new toolkit that's a little bit better at evading detection. Right. So that's one of the reasons they're switching over. And it's, honestly, the problem is they've used, and I believe if I remember correctly, the term here is Badger as opposed to Beacon. So instead of a Cobalt Strike beacon, a Badger gets deployed and does certain things. But it's the same thing. It's just a process that runs and does things. But I think the problem is they used Cobalt Strike so much that all of your antivirus vendors and your endpoint detection companies, etc., are now looking very heavily for Cobalt Strike. So the bad guys go, okay, what do we do? We'll just switch to a different one. And now they've switched over to a new one.
Yep.
So if you're a home user, trust the fact that Defender's going to try and find these anyways. If you're a business user and you're writing things like Yaris rules and you're actively hunting people on your network, bad guys on your network, which there are threat hunting teams in larger organizations. If you're on a threat hunting team, just know that you may want to change your IOCs to start looking for this new C2. Indicators of compromise. So what type of traffic would you see off of a computer that's been compromised? What type of sites might they talk to? What type of processes spit up?
Dwayne's moving towards an abbreviation-only language.
Absolutely. It's just more efficient that way.
Everything is just letters.
And when we're all in the Borg, we'll all talk in it. So, just this is a warning. Palo Alto Unit 42, which is their sort of research unit, did a great analysis of this particular C2, or in this case, they say C4 because it's a customizable C2, whatever. But, it's just good to know what I would look up that report. We'll have a link to the Unit 42 report, which is very good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been an interesting week, that's for sure. Good thing that we don't live in China.
Yeah.
And God bless America. What else can I say? I think that's it. Let's call it a show, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Sounds good, gentlemen. All right.
Bye.